The sky was no longer blue. It was dark, clouded with smoke and the constant thrum of alien ships descending from above. The world had changed in an instant, and Jack Carter could feel it in his bones. Once, the world had been full of life, streets crowded with people, cities buzzing with energy, families living their lives. But that was before the invasion. Now the streets were silent, save for the sound of distant explosions and the rumble of falling buildings. The Earth had been invaded by an alien force, and humanity was barely holding on. Cities were crumbling, governments were falling, and millions had already died. And as the sky grew darker with the looming ships, Jack stood in the middle of it all, unmoving. He was one of the last survivors in his city, his home, and though the situation seemed hopeless, he wasn't afraid. Jack had seen fear. He felt it in the pit of his stomach when his family was torn apart, when the world seemed to break. But not anymore, not today. The aliens had come with force, tearing through the world with weapons no one on Earth could match. They destroyed everything in their path, cities reduced to dust. Earth's strongest armies were crushed in moments. The most advanced weapons humanity had were nothing more than toys in the hands of the invaders. But Jack wasn't playing their game. Standing in the wreckage of what used to be a bustling street corner, Jack wasn't just another survivor, he was something more. He was a man who had lost everything, his family, his home, his world, but still stood tall, unwavering. He wasn't looking to run or hide. No, Jack had decided he would fight. He had decided that no matter how impossible it seemed, he would not let Earth fall without a struggle. The sun had long since disappeared behind the looming alien ships, and the night was heavy with the sound of alien aircraft buzzing overhead. They were here, the invaders with their sleek black ships and their cold, emotionless faces. They were the ones who had taken everything from him, and now they would have to pay. Jack stood there for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the sky. His breath was steady, his mind calm. It didn't matter how many aliens there were, how powerful their weapons were. He wasn't afraid. He had lived through worse. In his hand, Jack held a weapon, nothing special, just an old, rusted sword he'd found in the ruins of a nearby store. It wasn't a weapon that could stop an alien warship or tear through their armor, but it was all he had left, and it was enough. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Alien soldiers were coming down the street. They marched in formation, their sleek armored bodies glinting in the light of the fires around them. They were tall, imposing, their movements synchronized as if they were all one mind. But even as they approached, Jack didn't flinch. He had seen enough to know that fear wouldn't help. Fear would make him weak. Fear would make him run, and he was done running. As the alien soldiers approached, one of them, taller than the rest, its armor shining brightly in the dim light, stepped forward. It was the leader, the one in charge of this battalion. Its glowing eyes locked onto Jack's. For a moment, they just stood there, staring at each other. The alien leader tilted its head slightly, as if confused by the fact that a human was standing in its path. The alien's deep, mechanical voice boomed in the silence. "Why do you resist?" it asked, its tone laced with condescension. "You are nothing but insects beneath us. You cannot win." Jack's lips curled into a small, bitter smile. He knew what they thought. They thought they were superior. They thought they were unstoppable. But Jack wasn't about to let them have the satisfaction of seeing him cower. "I'm not here to win," Jack said, his voice steady. "I'm here to make sure you never forget us." The alien blinked as if it didn't understand. Then it raised its weapon, a long, energy-infused spear, and pointed it at Jack. "You will die like all the others. Your resistance is pointless." Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had already made his decision. He wasn't going to back down, not now, not ever. Without warning, he lunged forward. The alien leader swung its spear, aiming for Jack's chest. But Jack was faster. He twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the weapon's deadly arc. The leader swung again, this time aiming for his head. But Jack ducked, rolling across the ground and coming up behind the alien. With a fierce growl, Jack swung his blade, catching the alien leader's armor along its shoulder. The blade scraped across the surface, leaving a deep, sparking scratch. The alien howled in pain, spinning to face Jack. "You are strong," the alien said, its voice filled with a rare emotion, surprise. "But you are still only human." Jack didn't need to reply. He took advantage of the alien's distraction and lunged again. This time, his sword hit its mark. It sliced through the alien's armor, piercing deep into its side. The leader staggered back, its breathing ragged. Jack could see the shock in its eyes, and for a brief moment the alien hesitated. But Jack didn't give it the chance to recover. With one final, swift motion, he drove his blade deep into the alien's chest. The leader fell to the ground, a trail of glowing blood splattering across the cracked pavement. Jack stood over the fallen alien, chest heaving, his sword still buried in its body. He didn't celebrate. He didn't cheer. He just watched as the alien's life flickered away. "You thought we were weak," Jack whispered, his voice low, "but we are stronger than you'll ever know." The street was silent again, except for the distant rumble of explosions and the crackle of fires burning in the wreckage. Jack pulled his sword free and wiped it clean, his eyes scanning the area for the next threat. He didn't know how long he could keep fighting. He didn't know how long humanity could hold on. But he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't giving up. The fight had only just begun. The city was a ruin. Buildings that had once stood tall and proud now lay in crumbling heaps of concrete and twisted metal. The streets were littered with debris, the air thick with the smell of smoke and the remnants of destruction. But even in the face of utter devastation, Jack Carter moved with a steady, determined pace. He had just killed one of them, one of the alien invaders who had come to Earth with an army so powerful that it seemed unbeatable. But Jack's heart was still pounding with adrenaline. His victory was small. A single alien, no matter how powerful, wasn't going to turn the tide of the war. But it was a victory, and that was enough to fuel his resolve. Jack didn't flinch when the wind howled through the empty streets, carrying the smell of burning ruins with it. He didn't look away when he saw the wreckage of his old home in the distance, the place where his family had once lived. He had no time for memories. His focus was sharp, his mind laser-focused on what needed to be done. In the distance, he spotted movement, the telltale glow of alien soldiers marching in formation, dozens of them, their gleaming armor reflecting the red light of the burning city around them. They were advancing on his position. Jack knew he had to move fast, but this time he wasn't alone. A small group of survivors had joined him, quietly gathering in the shadows. They were soldiers, civilians, anyone who had managed to survive the chaos. Together they had formed a resistance, small but growing. Their mission was simple: survive, and if they were lucky, they might just take down enough aliens to make a difference. Jack's fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword as he approached the others. His face was hard, determined. There was no fear in his eyes. They had seen what he had done to the first alien leader, and they knew that he wasn't just a survivor. He was a fighter, and fighters had a way of making things happen, even when the odds were stacked against them. "Jack," one of the survivors said, his voice low, "we can't take them all, they're too strong." Jack met his gaze, his expression unwavering. "We don't have to take them all, we just have to make them pay." The survivor swallowed hard, looking unsure, but Jack's confidence was contagious. One by one, the others nodded, their faces set in grim determination. They had lost too much to turn back now. It was time to fight. Jack signaled for them to follow. They moved quickly through the debris, staying low to the ground, each step calculated. The aliens, oblivious to their presence, continued their march toward the city center. Jack's team was close now, so close they could hear the hum of the alien armor, the soft clanking of boots on cracked pavement. Jack took a deep breath and raised his hand, signaling for his team to stop. They crouched behind the remnants of a destroyed vehicle, waiting for the perfect moment. Jack's mind raced with calculations. He had no illusions about their odds, but he wasn't about to let fear dictate his actions. As the alien soldiers drew closer, Jack whispered, "Now." Without a sound, the resistance sprang into action. They moved with practiced precision, splitting into smaller groups to take down their enemies. The first alien soldier didn't even know what hit it. One of Jack's allies, a woman named Sarah, darted forward, her blade slicing through the air and catching the alien by surprise. It crumpled to the ground, its body falling with a metallic thud. The rest of the soldiers reacted instantly, but Jack and his team were already on the move. Jack's sword flashed in the dim light as he sliced through another alien, his movements fluid and quick. The aliens tried to retaliate, their energy weapons firing, but the humans were too fast. For every alien that fell, another took its place. The battle was chaotic, but Jack's team fought like a well-oiled machine, moving as one. Jack could see the shock in the aliens' eyes as they realized they weren't facing helpless humans. These weren't the terrified survivors they had expected. These were fighters. But even as they fought, Jack knew this victory wouldn't come easily. He could see the larger alien forces gathering in the distance. More soldiers, more ships. It was only a matter of time before reinforcements arrived, and Jack didn't have the numbers to hold them off forever. He fought harder, pushing himself beyond his limits. Sweat dripped down his face, his muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop, not when the world was hanging by a thread. The battle raged on, and Jack's sword met alien armor again and again, each strike pushing him closer to the edge. But just as he thought they might be able to win, just as he saw hope flickering in the eyes of his comrades, disaster struck. A massive explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. The shockwave threw Jack to the ground, his vision spinning. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The world seemed to slow, the sound of gunfire and alien roars fading into the background. He pushed himself up, his head spinning. Through the haze of smoke and dust, he saw it, an alien warship, much larger than the others, descending from the sky. It hovered over the battlefield, its massive cannons aimed directly at Jack's team. "They're bringing in reinforcements," Sarah said, her voice strained as she grabbed Jack's arm. "We have to retreat now." Jack didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the warship, his mind racing. He knew they couldn't fight this battle forever. But if they retreated now, it would be a sign of defeat. The aliens would see them as weak. "We don't run," Jack said, his voice fierce. "We fight until the last breath." He stood tall, his sword still in hand, his body bruised but unbroken. He turned to face the alien warship, a defiant expression on his face. The rest of his team stood with him, their faces set in grim determination. They had lost so much. They had seen their world torn apart, but they weren't finished yet. As the first alien blast fired from the warship, Jack didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on the enemy. He knew what was coming, but he was ready. Ready to die fighting, ready to make sure that the aliens would never forget the humans who had stood tall in the face of destruction. Because Jack Carter wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for the future. The battlefield was littered with the broken bodies of fallen alien soldiers, their cold, lifeless eyes staring up at the shattered sky. The aftermath of the fight was overwhelming. Jack stood amidst the ruins, panting heavily, his body battered and bruised. Sweat mixed with the dirt on his face, but his resolve never wavered. He had done it. His team had done it. Against all odds, they had won this time. But Jack knew this victory was temporary. The aliens wouldn't stop, not now. Not after they had tasted the bitter sting of defeat, and they had seen Jack's face, his defiance, his rage. He knew they'd come for him. "We need to move," Sarah said, her voice low as she stood beside him. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes were clear, focused. She had been with Jack since the early days of the resistance, and her loyalty had never wavered. Jack nodded, his gaze sweeping over the remnants of the battlefield. "Yeah, we need to keep moving. There's no time to rest." As they gathered the surviving members of their small team, Jack couldn't help but feel a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The resistance was growing. They were no longer just a handful of scattered survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. The survivors, once hopeless and broken, now walked with their heads held higher. The courage in their eyes was something Jack hadn't seen in months. They were no longer the hunted. They were the hunters, and Jack had given them that. It was hard to believe that only a few days ago he had been one man fighting alone. Now he was leading a growing army of people who were ready to take the fight to the aliens, no matter the cost. Jack led them through the crumbling streets of the city, moving quickly and quietly. The alien forces were still out there, and Jack knew they had to keep their movements low. He couldn't afford to make another mistake. As they passed through what used to be a busy marketplace, one of the survivors, a young woman named Maria, stopped and looked around. Her eyes were filled with sorrow as she took in the devastation around her. "I used to shop here," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I never thought I'd see it like this." Jack stopped beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We all lost something, but we're still here, we're still fighting, and we're not going to let them take anything else from us." Maria nodded, wiping away a tear. She didn't say anything else, but Jack saw the fire in her eyes. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was determination. And that was what he needed. That was what they all needed. As they moved on, Jack's mind raced. They needed more supplies, more weapons, food, medicine. They had to keep fighting, but they couldn't do it without the resources to sustain them. Jack had a plan. He'd been tracking alien supply lines, searching for weaknesses in their operations. He knew where the alien strongholds were, and he knew where their supplies were stored. It was risky, but it was their only chance. They arrived at an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Jack had scouted it before, and he was sure it was where the aliens were keeping some of their most valuable resources. The building was quiet, too quiet. Jack's instincts told him something was wrong. He motioned for his team to spread out and stay low. "I don't like this," Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the area. Jack nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Stay sharp. There's something off about this place." They slowly entered the warehouse, moving through the shadows. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He could hear the faint sound of movement in the distance, but it wasn't enough to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. He had to stay focused. They reached the center of the warehouse, where stacks of alien crates were piled high. It was the supplies they had been looking for: food, medical kits, and weapons. But as Jack approached the crates, something caught his eye. A faint red light blinked from a hidden corner of the room. He motioned for his team to stop. "I think we've been set up," Jack muttered under his breath. Before he could react, the lights in the warehouse flickered and alarms blared. It was a trap. Alien soldiers poured into the warehouse from every direction, their weapons raised and ready. Jack's heart sank, but his resolve never wavered. This was it. The battle was far from over, but they had come too far to turn back now. The resistance fighters scattered, opening fire on the approaching aliens. Jack led the charge, his sword flashing as he cut through the first wave of soldiers. His team followed his lead, fighting with the ferocity of cornered animals. But Jack could see that this was different. The aliens were organized, methodical. They were learning from their mistakes. The resistance was outnumbered, and Jack knew they couldn't hold out forever. The warship was still hovering above them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "We can't win this one," Sarah shouted over the roar of the battle. "We need to fall back." Jack shook his head, his jaw set. "No, we fight. We hold them off for as long as we can." But even as he said the words, Jack knew the truth. They couldn't win this fight, not today, not without reinforcements. As the fight raged on, Jack's mind raced. Where were the other survivors? Where were the allies he had sent for backup? He had to believe they would come. They had to. A sudden explosion shook the warehouse, sending debris flying. Jack stumbled, falling to his knees. His ears rang, and for a moment he thought he might lose consciousness. But then something strange happened. The aliens stopped firing. There was a long, tense silence, broken only by the crackling of flames and the distant sound of gunfire. Jack struggled to his feet, his body aching. His team was exhausted, but they were still standing. A voice crackled through the comms, a voice Jack had never heard before. "This is Commander Sullivan. We've got your back, Jack. Hold your position." A wave of relief washed over Jack. Reinforcements had arrived. They weren't alone. "Get ready, team," Jack shouted. "We're not finished yet." With the backup arriving, Jack's team renewed their assault, and for the first time in days they felt a glimmer of hope. They could win this. They could take Earth back. But Jack knew this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, and the real fight was just starting. But no matter what happened next, one thing was clear: humanity was not ready to give up yet. The sound of the alien warship's engines hummed in the air, a constant reminder of the looming threat above them. Jack Carter's team had held their ground long enough to prove something to the aliens and to themselves. The reinforcements had come, just like Commander Sullivan had promised. They fought side by side, humans and soldiers alike, pushing back against the alien invaders. But Jack knew the war wasn't just about strength. It was about something deeper: strategy. The resistance had won small battles, but the war wasn't over. Every victory only brought them closer to the bigger conflict ahead. As Jack stood in the ruined streets, staring at the sky filled with alien ships, he knew one thing for sure: the aliens were learning from their mistakes. They had made the wrong choice by underestimating humans once, but now they had seen what the resistance was capable of. Jack clenched his fists, his mind whirling with calculations. He knew what was coming. The alien forces would strike harder, smarter, and they would have more firepower. If they were going to stand a chance, they needed to be even smarter. "Jack," Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. "What's the plan? We can't keep running from them. We need to hit them where it hurts." Jack turned to her, his face weary but determined. "I know," he said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "We need to outsmart them. We've been fighting with brute force, but we can't do that forever. We need to cut off their supply lines, take down their communication hubs, hit them where they're weakest." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You think we can do that?" Jack nodded. "I don't think we can. I know we can." The team had barely had time to recover from the last battle, but Jack's mind was already planning the next one. They needed to make the aliens think they were losing, make them believe that they were no longer in control. That would be their chance. Jack turned to the rest of his team. All right, here's the plan. We know the aliens are controlling their troops through their communication systems. If we can take down their main relay station, they'll be blind for hours. We'll have an opening to hit them where it counts. One of the soldiers, a man named Greg, frowned. That sounds risky, Jack. We'll be walking straight into their headquarters. I know, Jack said, his gaze unwavering, but it's the only chance we've got. The team didn't hesitate. They had come to trust Jack completely. They had seen him fight, seen his ability to lead even in the darkest moments. His resolve was like a beacon, guiding them forward. They moved quickly, slipping through the ruined streets, staying in the shadows. Jack led them through narrow alleyways and abandoned buildings, his mind never slowing down. He was already thinking 2 steps ahead, calculating the risks, weighing the odds. They had to be fast, silent, and precise. When they reached the outskirts of the alien command center, Jack paused. They were close now, so close that the low hum of alien machinery could be heard vibrating through the ground. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline, but he kept his emotions in check. This was it. This was their moment. Stay close, Jack whispered to his team. We move fast, in and out, no mistakes. They crept forward, their footsteps muffled by the soft dust beneath them. Jack's eyes darted to the alien patrols, who moved with eerie synchronization. It was like they had eyes everywhere, but Jack had learned to stay calm, to observe. They would find a way in. As they neared the main building, Jack motioned for everyone to stop. The entrance was heavily guarded. 2 alien soldiers stood by the door, their eyes scanning the area. Jack had expected this. The aliens were nothing if not thorough, but they hadn't anticipated Jack's team. He motioned for Sarah to move ahead, and she slipped into the shadows with practiced ease. With one swift movement, she incapacitated one of the guards, dragging him out of sight before the other had a chance to react. Jack's heart raced as he saw the other guard turn toward the now empty spot where his partner had been standing. But before he could call for reinforcements, Jack lunged, knocking him out cold with a swift blow to the back of the head. The team quickly moved inside, the building dark and quiet, its halls echoing with the faint sound of alien machinery. Jack took the lead, his eyes scanning the walls, looking for the communication relay. It wasn't hard to find. The building was built for efficiency. The aliens didn't waste time with unnecessary decorations. Every hallway, every door had a purpose. They reached the control room in minutes. The door was locked, but Jack had a key now, the access codes he had stolen from an alien officer weeks before. He punched in the numbers quickly, the door sliding open with a soft hiss. Inside, rows of glowing consoles lined the walls. The central control station sat at the far end of the room, humming with activity. Jack moved toward it, his mind racing. He didn't have much time. The team fanned out, securing the room, but Jack focused on the task at hand. He had to shut down their communication system. If they succeeded, it would cripple the alien forces for hours. But if they failed, they would be wiped out. He sat down at the console, his fingers flying over the keys. The alien interface was complicated, but Jack had studied it. He had learned everything he could about their technology, and now it was time to use it against them. Jack, Sarah called, her voice tense. Hurry up. Jack didn't answer. His focus was absolute. He was so close he could feel it. A few more seconds and... The alarms went off. Shit, Jack cursed under his breath. They had been spotted. The door to the control room slammed open, and a dozen armed alien soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised. Jack didn't hesitate. He hit the final command, and the entire communication system went dark. The aliens froze. Now, Jack shouted. The team opened fire, their weapons lighting up the room in a hail of bullets. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but his movements were sharp and precise. The aliens tried to retaliate, but their coordination faltered. They had no way of communicating. Jack and his team fought like animals, each one of them giving everything they had. The aliens were strong, but they were confused, disorganized. Without their communication systems, they were vulnerable. It wasn't long before the last of the alien soldiers in the room were taken down. Jack stood panting, his eyes scanning the room, making sure no one else was left. His team was bruised, bloodied, but alive. He turned back to the control panel, his heart racing with adrenaline. We did it, he muttered. We've crippled them. The team gathered around him, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and triumph. They had won this battle, but Jack knew there would be more. The war was far from over. But today they had struck a blow. Today they had made the aliens feel something they never expected: fear. Jack looked at his team, his eyes full of pride. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. "We'll keep fighting and we'll win." War had dragged on longer than anyone could have imagined. The once vibrant cities were now nothing more than skeletal remains of what they used to be. Jack Carter had seen it all: the destruction, the pain, the fear. Yet through every loss, every battle, his resolve remained unshaken. He had led his team through countless struggles, but now the time had come for the final push. The aliens had grown more ruthless. They had unleashed their full might upon the Earth, and their numbers had only increased. But Jack wasn't going to let that break him. He knew the stakes now. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming their home, their dignity, and their future. He stood on a rooftop, looking out at the city in front of him. The alien warships filled the sky, their dark silhouettes blocking out the stars. It was a haunting sight, but Jack had no fear in his heart. He had something the aliens could never understand: human resilience. "We need to hit them now," Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, steady and sure. She had become his most trusted ally, and through everything she had never once wavered. Jack turned to face her, his eyes burning with determination. "We've waited long enough. Tonight we take the fight to their doorstep." A small group of survivors had gathered, their faces a mix of exhaustion and hope. They had been fighting for so long, and Jack knew they had given everything they had. This would be their final mission. The plan was simple but dangerous: break through the alien stronghold and take down their command center. If they succeeded, they would cripple the alien forces for good. If they failed, well, Jack didn't allow himself to think about failure. The team made their way through the city, avoiding the alien patrols as best they could. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds being the occasional distant explosion or the hum of alien ships overhead. Jack could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he didn't let it show. They were so close now. As they neared the alien stronghold, Jack's mind raced. He knew this was it. There was no going back after this. They had come too far, lost too much. If they failed, the Earth would fall. The thought pushed him forward, one foot in front of the other, never stopping. They reached the entrance to the alien facility, massive, imposing, and heavily guarded. Jack motioned for the team to stop, and they crouched low, hidden in the shadows. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was calm. This was it. No more waiting. They had to make their move. Sarah looked at Jack, her expression unreadable. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded. "Let's do this." With a signal, the team sprang into action. They moved quickly, silently, taking down the guards one by one. Jack's blade flashed through the air, cutting through alien armor with ease. His team followed his lead, each one of them moving with precision, taking out any aliens that got in their way. It was chaotic, but it was controlled chaos. They had done this before, and they knew what they were doing. The deeper they went into the facility, the stronger the alien presence became. The air was thick with tension, and Jack could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. The aliens knew they were coming. But Jack had one advantage: they underestimated humans. They always had. "We're almost there," Jack said, his voice steady. His grip tightened around his sword. "Just a little further." The team pressed on, moving through the facility's narrow corridors, dodging enemy fire and avoiding traps. The aliens had set up defenses, but Jack and his team had learned how to work around them. They were too smart, too fast to be stopped. Finally, they reached the heart of the command center. The doors loomed in front of them, massive and imposing, guarded by more aliens than Jack had ever seen in one place. They were preparing for a final defense, the last line of their dying empire. But Jack wasn't afraid. He turned to his team, his eyes filled with fire. "This is it. No matter what happens, we do this together. We break through or we die trying, but we don't stop." The team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this was their best shot. There would be no second chances. Jack pushed open the door and they stormed into the room, weapons raised. The alien soldiers inside barely had time to react before the team unleashed hell. Gunfire filled the air, and the sound of explosions shook the ground beneath them. The aliens fought back with everything they had, but Jack's team was relentless. The fight was brutal, and the casualties on both sides were mounting. Jack felt the weight of every loss, every scream, every blow landed by the enemy. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His eyes never left the alien command center, where the alien leader, an imposing figure in black armor, stood watching the chaos unfold. Jack's gaze locked with the alien leaders. There was no fear in Jack's eyes, just pure, unfiltered rage. "You think you can defeat us?" the alien leader asked, its voice cold and mocking. "You're just a handful of weak humans. You will never win." Jack's lips curled into a bitter smile. "I'm not here to win. I'm here to make you pay for what you've done." With that, Jack lunged forward, charging at the alien leader. The battle between them was fierce, each one landing blows with the force of 1,000 storms. Jack was fast, relentless, and driven by pure anger. Every strike was personal. The aliens had destroyed his world, killed his friends, and torn apart everything he held dear. Now it was time to make them feel that pain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack drove his sword into the alien leader's chest. The leader let out a strangled gasp before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. The room fell silent. The remaining aliens stood in shock, staring at their fallen leader. They had lost their commander, their driving force, and with that, their resolve crumbled. Jack's team pressed on, taking down the remaining aliens with swift precision. It didn't take long for the command center to fall. The aliens had lost. As Jack stood in the wreckage of the battle, his chest heaving with exhaustion, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They had done it. They had won. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Jack felt like humanity had a chance. They weren't weak. They weren't helpless. They were survivors, and as long as they kept fighting, they would never be defeated. Jack turned to his team, a proud smile on his face. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We've won today, but we're not finished yet." And with that, the fight for Earth raged on. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and smoke. The ground beneath Jack's boots was cracked, the earth scorched from the relentless battles that had torn through the city. In the distance, the alien ships still hovered above, like dark vultures waiting for the last breath of their prey. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack could feel something that had been missing, a sense of hope. They had won the battle for the alien command center. The resistance had broken through, and the alien forces were retreating. The leadership that had orchestrated the invasion was in ruins, but Jack knew this was far from over. The war was still alive, and the aliens had only retreated to regroup, to plan their next move. "Jack," Sarah said, her voice shaking with exhaustion as she approached him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "We did it. We actually did it." Jack looked at her, his face grim. "We won today, but there's more to do. We can't stop now." Sarah nodded, her face a mix of pride and fear. "I know, but do you think we can keep going? I mean, we've lost so much already. How much longer can we fight?" Jack didn't have an answer. They had lost countless lives, and every day the stakes seemed higher. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, but he couldn't let it show. He couldn't afford to doubt now, not when the resistance had come so far. "We'll keep fighting," he said, his voice steady. "We have no other choice." The resistance had rallied in the wake of the alien command center's fall. Survivors from all over the city had joined their ranks, and the movement was gaining strength. But they still didn't have the resources to face the full alien force. The aliens had regrouped, and Jack knew their retaliation would be brutal. The next day, as Jack and his team set up camp in the ruins of the city, a familiar face approached. It was Commander Sullivan, the leader of the reinforcements who had helped them when the odds seemed impossible. "Jack," Sullivan said, her voice low but filled with respect. "We've received word from the underground network. There's a chance we can finally hit them where it hurts. We've located their main supply depot, their heart, if you will." Jack's eyes narrowed. "How do you know it's real?" Sullivan hesitated for only a moment, then pulled out a map, unfolding it on the ground in front of Jack. "We've tracked their movements. They've been consolidating resources here at the old power plant. It's heavily guarded, but it's our best shot at crippling them for good." Jack studied the map, his mind racing. A direct assault on the power plant would be risky, no doubt. But if they could destroy the aliens' supply chain, it would slow them down, maybe even force them to retreat entirely. It was a long shot, but it was the best shot they had. "Do we have a team for this?" Jack asked. "We can assemble one," Sullivan said. "But this will take more than just a few soldiers. We need everyone we can get, and we need to move quickly before the aliens realize what we're up to." Jack stood up, his resolve hardening. "Then let's do it. We can't wait any longer. This is our chance." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. The resistance worked in overdrive, organizing the team, gathering supplies, and making sure everyone knew their roles. Jack could feel the weight of the task ahead pressing on his shoulders, but he didn't show it. He had to keep his team focused, keep them believing in the impossible. As the team set off toward the power plant under the cover of night, Jack's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. They were about to walk straight into the heart of the alien forces, and failure wasn't an option. The resistance had come too far. They had already paid too much. The night was silent as they moved through the ruined streets, keeping to the shadows. The familiar hum of alien ships echoed overhead, but they couldn't afford to be seen. Jack moved at the head of the group, his eyes scanning the area, his instincts on high alert. They reached the outskirts of the power plant without incident, but as they neared the entrance, Jack's heart sank. The plant was more heavily guarded than he had anticipated. Alien soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their glowing eyes scanning the area for intruders. Jack motioned for his team to halt, his mind racing. "This is it," he whispered to Sarah, his voice barely audible. "We get in, plant the explosives, and get out fast." Sarah nodded, her hand tightening around her weapon. "What's the plan, Jack?" Jack took a deep breath. "We'll split into two groups. One group will create a diversion on the north side. The other will infiltrate from the south and plant the charges. We hit them fast and hard." It was a risky move, but it was their only option. Jack knew the team had to be quick and efficient. They couldn't afford to waste time. The diversion went off as planned. Explosions rocked the northern perimeter of the power plant, drawing the attention of the alien soldiers. As the aliens scrambled to respond, Jack's team moved swiftly, sneaking into the facility through the south entrance. They had no time to waste. Every second counted. Inside, the power plant was a maze of metal and machinery, a labyrinth of alien technology. The team split up, each group moving toward their designated targets. Jack's heart raced as they navigated the dark corridors, the sound of their footsteps the only noise in the eerie silence. When they reached the central chamber, the place was buzzing with alien activity. It was clear they were preparing for something big. Jack's mind whirred with the possibilities, but it didn't matter. They had a mission, and they had to finish it. Jack and his group planted the last of the explosives, his hands trembling with the weight of what they were about to do. The detonator was set. "All teams fall back," he shouted into the comms. The countdown had begun. The team raced back toward the entrance, but the aliens were beginning to close in. Jack could hear the sound of their heavy boots echoing in the hallways. They were running out of time. "Move, move, move," Jack yelled as the team sprinted toward the exit. The sound of alien fire rang out behind them, but they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. As they reached the exit, Jack glanced over his shoulder. The aliens were almost upon them, but they made it to the outer wall just in time. Jack hit the button on the detonator. The explosion shook the ground beneath them. The power plant erupted in a flash of light and fire, the shockwave blasting through the facility. Jack and his team were thrown to the ground, the force of the explosion knocking them off their feet. When Jack opened his eyes, the power plant was gone. The alien stronghold had been reduced to rubble. They had done it. They had struck a blow that would echo across the battlefield. The aliens were reeling, and for the first time, Jack could feel it. The war was changing. The resistance had delivered a message. Earth was not finished, and they would keep fighting until they had won. Jack helped his team to their feet, his heart racing with adrenaline. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady. "But we've shown them what we're capable of. Now we take the fight to them." The war was far from over, but for the first time, Jack had hope. And he would fight no matter what it took to make sure humanity would never surrender again. The sky was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the stars above and the distant fires still burning from the battle. The streets of the city were silent now, save for the soft crackle of embers and the low hum of alien ships retreating into the sky. The war, which had seemed endless, was finally shifting in humanity's favor. But for Jack Carter, the victory didn't feel like relief. It felt like the beginning of something more. He stood in the wreckage of what had once been a thriving city, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The alien forces had been dealt a significant blow. The power plant was destroyed, their communication systems shattered. For the first time since the invasion began, Jack saw a flicker of doubt in their eyes. They were vulnerable. Jack's team had done it. They had crippled the alien supply chain, taken down their command centers, and fought tooth and nail to take back their world. But even as they celebrated, Jack couldn't ignore the deep ache in his chest. So much had been lost. So many lives, so many homes, all reduced to dust in the wake of the invasion. He didn't have time to dwell on it. There was still work to be done. The aliens had retreated, but they would regroup and they would come back stronger. Jack knew that. But this time, humanity was ready. This time, they wouldn't just survive, they would win. The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. He turned to see Sarah approaching, her face worn but determined. She had been by his side through every battle, every loss. She had seen it all. But she was still standing, still fighting, just like him. "Jack," Sarah said, her voice tired but filled with a quiet pride. "We did it. The aliens are falling back. We've bought ourselves time." Jack nodded but didn't speak at first. His eyes scanned the broken landscape around them. He thought about the people they had lost, his family, his friends, the countless innocents caught in the crossfire. He thought about how it felt to watch his world burn. "It doesn't feel like enough," Jack said softly. "We've won battles, but we've lost so much. How do we rebuild after this?" Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "We rebuild by remembering what we fought for. We fought for our homes, for our families, for each other. That's how we rebuild." Jack met her gaze, his heart swelling with emotion. He had been so focused on the fight that he had almost forgotten what they were fighting for. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to live. Fighting to make sure that their future, their children's future, wasn't stolen from them. "You're right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We fight for more than just victory. We fight for everything we've lost and everything we still have left." Sarah smiled, a small but hopeful expression on her face. "And we'll keep fighting, Jack, together." The weight of the moment settled on Jack's shoulders, but he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters. They were a family, and together they could rebuild. The days that followed were filled with both victory and sorrow. The resistance had become a symbol of humanity's strength, drawing in more survivors from across the world. People who had once hidden in fear now stood side by side with Jack and his team, ready to take the fight to the remaining alien forces. Jack worked tirelessly, helping to strategize the next steps, but he also made sure to spend time with the people who had supported him throughout it all. He visited the survivors, listening to their stories, their fears, and their hopes for the future. It reminded him why he kept fighting. It reminded him of the faces of the people he was doing this for. One morning, as Jack and Sarah stood together at a new resistance camp, overlooking the makeshift hospital where wounded soldiers were being cared for, Sarah turned to him. "We've come so far, Jack," she said quietly. "But do you think we can really do it? Can we truly defeat them?" Jack's gaze hardened, but his voice was filled with the certainty of someone who had seen the worst but still believed in the best. "We can, because we don't stop. We don't give up, not ever." The final push came sooner than they expected. The alien forces, realizing they could not maintain their hold on Earth, made one last desperate attempt to crush the resistance. They launched a full-scale assault on what remained of the human strongholds, hoping to finish what they had started. But Jack's team was ready. Every soldier, every civilian, everyone who had joined the fight knew that this was the moment they had been preparing for. The aliens had underestimated humanity once again. The battle was fierce. The alien ships rained fire down from above, their weapons tearing through the buildings and streets. But the humans fought back with everything they had, refusing to let their world fall again. Jack led the charge, his sword flashing in the smoke-filled air, his heart beating with the rhythm of battle. Each strike was more than just a blow against the invaders. It was a message, a declaration that Earth would not be conquered, that humanity would rise up no matter how powerful the enemy. As the battle raged on, Jack could see the alien forces starting to falter. They had pushed humanity to the brink, but they had underestimated their will to fight. One by one, the alien warships began to retreat, their commanders realizing they couldn't win. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The remaining alien forces retreated into the sky, leaving behind nothing but the rubble of their failed conquest. The Earth was still standing, and humanity was still alive. In the days that followed, the world began to heal. The alien ships that had once filled the sky were gone, and with them, the fear that had gripped humanity for so long. But even as Earth began to rebuild, Jack knew the scars would remain. The losses, the pain, the sacrifice, they would always be a part of them. But there was something else, too, something that had always been there beneath the surface. The strength to keep going, the strength to rise up even when everything seemed lost. Jack stood in the middle of what was left of the city, looking out over the streets that were slowly beginning to rebuild. It would take time, but humanity had proven something that day. They had proven that they could fight, they could endure, and they could win. The war was over. The Earth had been saved. But Jack knew that their greatest victory wasn't just surviving, it was the fact that they never gave up. And as long as there were people like him, like Sarah, like the rest of the resistance, there would always be hope. "We did it," Sarah said softly, standing beside him. Jack nodded, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Yeah, we did, and we'll keep doing it for as long as it takes." Together, they looked toward the future. The world was scarred, but it was theirs, and they would never let anyone take it from them again.